Welcome to the Stormsurf video surf forecast for the week starting Saturday, March 7th. Looking at significant wave heights for the North Pacific Ocean, we see an area of high pressure and no seas of interest over the dateline region in the core of the North Pacific. Low pressure off the U.S. West Coast is creating a bit of a gradient, producing 17-foot seas pushing south towards Hawaii, and trades, stronger than normal, are creating some seas pushing towards the Philippines, but of no real interest to our forecast area. Otherwise, seas in the Bering Sea are completely landlocked by the Aleutian Islands, and no other swell of interest is in production. We'll start our weekly tour looking at jet stream level winds. These winds, up about 30,000 feet, help support the formation of storms, and when those storms do form, help direct their track. It is upper level winds that really drive everything down at the surface. So as we see, much like weeks past, the jet stream's coming off Japan, pretty far to the south, but then splits, with the northern branch pushing up through the Bering Sea and looking rather anemic and weak, not very strong winds, and the southern branch pretty much going flat over Japan into Baja. A little bit of a cut-off trough, that is, the jet stream is not flowing directly into the trough, it's just a circulation in the upper level atmosphere, is north of Hawaii. There's been a trough here for about a week now, but it has cut off, but it is helping to support a little bit of gale formation, not even gale really, low pressure formation in that area. Otherwise, the split pattern is not conducive to storm development. As we put it into motion, the cutoff trough, or low even, really just continues circulating. The same basic pattern continues into Monday. And then on Tuesday, things are supposed to change a little bit. Here's the deal. Winds start building over Japan. What is this, 160 knots, looking very much like what we've been expecting for a while, with the thought that the MJO, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, is going to start building. When it starts building, it in turn starts imparting energy to the upper atmosphere, so it would not be unexpected to see winds picking up in this area. Also of note, notice the jet stream, rather than tracking the whole way through the Bering Sea, actually starts to fall down into the Gulf of Alaska, and we have a bit of a normal-looking flow here, that is, the southern branch and the northern branch, and consolidating into a singular flow pushing into the U.S. West Coast. This area here is a trough and would support low-pressure development if it were to form. But also notice winds are rather weak, so it wouldn't be much of a low or much of a gale if it did form. But let's put this into motion. Notice that trough continues to hold, looking fairly good. Winds continue to pick up here by Wednesday off Japan and continue building, and more energy starts working its way into the trough. Here we go. By into Friday, we're looking at 180 knot winds, almost 190 knot winds, and building from there still into Saturday and Sunday. There we go, 200 knot winds by late Saturday. Now they're kind of ridging rather than digging south, and it is the digging south, the troughiness, that helps support low pressure. But still, we have a bit of a trough, trying to get more organized here. You want good winds in the apex of the trough, down at the bottom of it here, to really get good support going. But it's a start. Notice by this point in time, we'll just take it out to 180 hours. Here you go, 200 knot winds over the dateline, falling into trough, consolidated flow the whole way across the North Pacific. This almost looks like winter again. This would be great if it were to happen. Let's see what effects this would have on the ocean surface. So here we go, surface level pressure, surface level winds. As suspected from the significant wave height chart, high pressure in control of the dateline, low pressure north of Hawaii, creating a little bit of gradient, little patch of 35 knot winds aimed south. That's really not significant at all. Weak high pressure off the U.S. West Coast, keeping things high and dry and mild. And of course, the trades that we saw blowing, 20, 25 knots over the dateline towards the Philippines. Let's put this into motion. As we see, this little gale low, whatever you want to call it, continues to produce 30 knot winds pushing south towards Hawaii into Sunday. Sort of actually redevelops a little bit there later on Sunday, but then fades out, and that's pretty much it. Good for wind swell for Hawaii, nothing more. Also notice a new low pressure starts developing on the northern dateline region on Sunday night, Monday, but tracking pretty much over the central Aleutians and obscured. It is not till later Tuesday that it starts really falling south of the Aleutians, little patch of 45 knot winds, otherwise 40 to 35 knot winds, targeting Hawaii well. Another larger low pressure system starting to develop over here over Japan, but completely landlocked, no fetch over open ocean, and no swell production forecast. Also notice a little low sort of an elongated type low developing here. This in association with the upper level flow. Remember, it went up like this, down like this. This is the trough that we saw in the upper atmosphere. The lower atmosphere is to respond in kind. Anyway, 35-knot winds continue on Tuesday, and it sort of pulses a little bit again on Wednesday. Another patch of 35-knot winds, all targeting Hawaii. Well, U.S. West Coast only has 25-knot fetch, and this beyond 1,000 miles out. That really is wind swell. Most of that will decay before it reaches the coast, of no particular interest. Anyway, roll this out. That low continues, but again, weak and not doing a whole lot. And then we get into Friday when the trough starts really developing in the upper atmosphere and strong winds start building over the dateline. Notice low pressure, all of a sudden, no sign of high pressure. Low pressure takes over the entire North Pacific north of 40 north. Now, not organized, pretty weak, a little patch of 35-knot winds there. Oops, that's it. But, well, here, you can see it. This is where we are right now. This is where we're going. It's a step in the right direction. The expectation is as the jet builds, as it digs in, as it has a little bit of a couple of days of persistence behind it, that will have more and more of an effect in the lower atmosphere. Low pressure should build in this area, and maybe we'll get into a storm cycle, especially with the MJO forecast to becoming active at the same time. It's really the MJO that's driving all this. The jet stream, the surface level, low pressure are the results of the MJO's influence on the atmosphere. So next we take a look at significant seas for the North Pacific Ocean. Again, this is just a different variant on the chart we saw earlier in the presentation. 18-foot seas north of Hawaii. North of Hawaii would be pretty much the 360-degree Great Circle path right into Hawaii. No big surprise there. Anyway, put this into motion. Notice that area sort of tracks southwest, and it sort of just meanders along here north of Hawaii. Where are we? We're on Monday, and then fades out. But anyway, here we'll just do one more right about there. Hawaii, so that is what's that, 350? So we would expect some sort of minor, basically wind swell from 350 to 360 degrees, eventually working its way into Hawaii, but of no particular interest. Then the next fetch, we saw this northern dateline, we're on Monday here, starts developing. We get a nice little patch of, what's that, 24-foot seas or so. Relative to Hawaii, that's right down the about 334-degree Great Circle path into Hawaii, and actually pushing well down that path to what is that? Actually 333 degrees, and continues falling south into what is that? Thursday. So that certainly looks like some swell should, if all goes as expected, reach the Hawaiian Islands probably by late in the work week. And but notice. None of this, actually, we'll go back. We'll do a quick look here. Relative to the U.S. West Coast, all that fetch is effectively perpendicular. Maybe some little sideband swell at best for California, but not a whole lot expected. At least not yet. Anyway, roll that out. We're into Friday, and then things sort of settle down while the North Pacific supposedly starts reorganizing. Oops. But notice this. Instead of the storm track being north to south, even the little bit of fetch and sea production that starts showing up is moving more on a west-east track. That would be consistent with what the jet stream is doing, and that would be an indicator of what's to come. Seas in this general area pushing more towards the U.S. West Coast, sideband energy for Hawaii, but also notice a little bit of high pressure setting up here. Maybe Hawaii will break out of the persistent north wind, Kona wind pattern, and better conditions will prevail, but that is a reach at this early date. Also of note, southern hemi. Already, one small southern hemi swell has reached California during the past week. Nothing significant, but head-high sets or so. Not bad. Another system developed, smaller this time, Tuesday night. 28-foot seas peaked right about there on Wednesday night. 34-foot seas. Relative to Southern California, that's about the 185-degree track. And relative to Northern California, it's about the 182-degree track. Once you get straight south, there's hardly any difference between North and Southern California. And relative to, now notice the track of this storm. Again, it's not really pushing north. It was more sort of a 45-degree angle relative to the Great Circle paths. So that means not all the potential swell that could possibly be generated will arrive. But again, good enough for a nice little pulse of swell. Really, here we go. Sorry. There we go. We're just sort of working our way down the coast here, finding where there's the more direct energy, probably Costa Rica or so. There you go. Yes, you can see it pushing right up the Great Circle tracks there. So if you're going to chase it, that would probably be a better target somewhere in Central America to maybe Peru or so. Anyway, just wanted to let you all know about that. All right, let's start looking at longer-term picture, and we were talking some about the MJO, and certainly, let's say, here's the Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. Notice negative numbers starting to show up. This is an indicator. This is the daily index. That suggests that pressure is lower in Tahiti relative to Darwin, and that we're moving towards the active phase of the MJO. We've been going through a pretty good run here. You can see we were in the inactive phase until about mid-February, and then we had a good long run of almost 3 weeks of positive numbers. That's pretty typical of the MJO, 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off. Now we're starting to move back into the active phase. Numbers are dipping. Not significantly, but dipping a little bit. The 30-day running average is dead neutral, basically 0 or 0.66. The 90-day running average is minus 5.36. We don't expect it to go a whole lot more positive if this daily run of negative numbers continues. That would be good. We were hovering about -8 for months and months. We've kind of popped up to the -5, but still we're in negative territory. If we're in La Nina, all these numbers would be positive and it'd be a totally different ball game. So we're still in the realm of things looking reasonably decent. We're kind of late in the winter, but we'll take anything we can get. Another run of the active phase of the MJO could produce a storm cycle, could produce some swell. Probably the last decent opportunity for the winter season. Here's another look at the 30-day SOI, but over time and graphed out. Let's see, 2013, basically La Nina conditions, positive SOI numbers, massive dip, significant change in the atmosphere starting January of 2014, kind of rebound. La Nina tried to make a comeback but didn't, and notice here we are, like we said earlier, in the -5 or the average was hovering right around here for months and months, the whole latter part of 2014. We've had our little positive spike here. Now the question is, are we going to go back into negative territory and stay there, or are we going to start meandering permanently up towards the positive range? Anyway, negative numbers represent El Nino, positive numbers, La Nina. The hope is we stay down in the negative territory. Next up, wind anomalies. We're only concerned with the equator and only the equator from about 170 west to about 140 east. This box right here, known as the Kelvin wave generation area, that's our term for it. Westerly anomalies. So these aren't actual wind directions. These are differences from normal for this time of year for this area. Right now, strong westerly anomalies blowing in the southern half of the Kelvin wave generation, just a couple of degrees either side of the equator. So you can draw a box right here. That's what we're inspecting. These westerly anomalies help promote Kelvin waves. Kelvin waves help support the development of El Nino, and typically westerly anomalies are associated with the active phase of the MJO, though when you're in a strong El Nino, the MJO dies completely and westerly anomalies persist consistently, which is basically a long-running active phase of the MJO. Anyway, so here we go, westerly anomalies in the West Pacific. This looks good. There's been a long run going since the middle of January. It kind of took a break for a week or two, and now they're back stronger than ever. This is a good sign. Looking to the east, Hawaii is right here, dateline's over here. Light to medium easterly anomalies. We would not expect anything over here. In this area, westerly anomalies in this area do nothing to support Kelvin wave development. It's got to be over in the west, and we'll see why in a minute. Looking a week out, Basically, westerly anomalies continue. Not as strong, but look at this. I mean, just a large area of west winds. Actually, it is out and out west winds, but for here, westerly anomalies extending from the maritime continent to, well, we're a bit south of the Kelvin wave generation here, but we'll take it and say 180 or so. And then when we get east of that area, again, Hawaii here, Mexico here, basically just a neutral pattern. So the thought is westerly anomalies continuing for the next week, feeding Kelvin wave development. Now here's data from the TAO buoy array. Buoys lined up along the equator the whole way across the Pacific Ocean, used to monitor El Nino. Here's actual wind speeds and water temperatures. Notice actual west winds blowing in this area. These are not anomalies. These are actual west winds, and we'll get more into that in a second. Here's the anomaly chart. Again, this is hard data from the surface. The charts we looked at before were actually models, and they're up at about 4,000 feet, the 850 millibar level. Here is hard data for sure. Westerly winds blowing, and notice there's warm water in this area. These westerly winds take that warm water, push it to depth, help form a Kelvin wave. So we kind of got into this a couple of months ago and said, let's just build a model focused on the Kelvin wave generation area so we can kind of monitor what's going on. So here's the model. Actually, this is the 0-hour hindcast, so it's a model depiction of what's actually going. Notice westerly winds over this entire area, and not just a little 5-knot wind. We're talking here 24 to almost 26 knots. That's, 25, 28 miles an hour over a large area. What is this? Oh, that's 10, let's say 15 degrees. That's over 750 nautical miles or more in this area of westerly winds. That would certainly help generate a Kelvin wave. Now watch this. Remember, normally here you have east winds, so this is a total reversal of trades. And notice as we go in time, that area only increases its aerial coverage the whole way up to the north end of the Kelvin wave generation. Notice this. Cyclone forecast in February, or no, I'm sorry, March, and a good solid one at that too. But this is not unusual. You get a big westerly wind burst, and what can happen during major El Ninos, during major westerly wind bursts, which this looks to be one. You can not only get a cyclone on this side of the equator, but you can get one up here as well. Winds blowing this way, northern hemisphere low pressure, counterclockwise circulation, same deal. Southern hemisphere clockwise circulation, that is low pressure on the other side of the equator. So this is qualifying if it plays out as forecast. Look, there's about the peak of it right there. And look at all this area covered by, that's just 22 knot or greater winds. Pretty much the whole Kelvin wave generation area has some degree of westerly fetch in it, and not just anomalies, but hard westerly winds. So this is really quite impressive and something to sort of look at. So we'll just roll this out. And so we're into 84 hours. Now, of course, the cyclone falls south, but notice you still have this sort of a northwesterly flow, which and westerly winds here still qualifies as westerly anomalies into, or I mean actual westerly winds into, well, we'll just keep going, and there's not really an end to it yet. Notice, here we go, some trades starting to show up on Friday night, but still way back here at 145 east, it's still westerly anomalies. This is a significant event if it plays out. And here's yet another way to view it over time. Time down this side, early February, going towards current. This is so looking at the scale here, the West Pacific would be here, West Pacific roughly here. Here is the last part of this westerly wind burst that started in mid-January. It sort of took a break for a couple of weeks here in the middle of February, woke up again about the 23rd of February, and here we are in this strong westerly wind burst event now, and scheduled to continue through the end, into the middle of March per this event. Certainly a sign that the MJO is going active, certainly a sign that Kelvin wave development is likely to be in play. Continuing on, the MJO models, actually they're outgoing long wave radiation models, but one can presume that they are also a secondary indicator of the MJO. Blues are less sunlight reflectivity off the ocean surface, suggesting clouds, suggesting the active phase of the MJO. The yellows and oranges the exact opposite. Active phase, per the statistic model, the CA model, currently over the maritime continent, forecast to migrate to the east to about the dateline 2 weeks out, but get progressively weaker, but still not dead 2 weeks out. So this gets you into, probably the better part of the last quarter of the month of March. The dynamic model, much more aggressive, suggesting an actually strengthening MJO signal over the dateline for the next 15 days. That looks good and is reasonably believable. Of even more interest, the upper level model run today. This is pretty much the strong. So this is a precipitation, potential for precipitation based on upper level data. The greens are lots of precipitation, yellows and orange, suppression of precipitation. This is about the strongest we've seen this chart depict precipitation potential over the past year or two since we've been using it. So anyway, that certainly is an indicator of the active phase of the MJO, and a strong, robust active phase that working its way east into about the end of March. So the thought would be, if a storm cycle were to form, this certainly would be supporting it, and it would continue, and the storm cycle would start probably in the dateline region and then slowly work its way to the east through the end of March, perhaps under the best of conditions, setting up more of a rain event for California long term, if one's to believe the models and go with the theory. Anyway, that follows by the end of March with the inactive phase making its run for a couple of weeks across the Pacific, and then a new active phase building in the Indian Ocean, starting to seep its way east into starting about mid-April. But by then, you're past the winter season. The MJO has a much less marked effect on the atmosphere in the North Pacific, and less of an effect in the southern hemisphere as well, but still worthy of monitoring. Next, ocean surface temperature deviations from normal. Okay, so yellows are warmer than normal temperatures, blues colder than normal. Interesting thing about this chart, so if we had a real El Nino, and we've been through this before, you'd see a lot of warm water basically in this area. If you have what we call a Modoki El Nino, which is what we're in, the warm water tends to be displaced more around the central to west Pacific, around the dateline, south, let's say, or even south of Hawaii, and you tend to have cool areas in the Nino 1.2 area near the Galapagos, and way over here north of New Guinea. That's exactly what we have. This is a Modoki El Nino. We've talked about this before. So the effects atmospherically are not nearly as great as a traditional El Nino, and the thought is wherever the warmest water is, north of there is where the most storm activity would occur, which would be here. And that's exactly what we've seen this winter so far. All the storm activity is really focused on the dateline, hardly anything making it to the U.S. West Coast, below normal precipitation, and generally a high-pressure offshore flow in control. Now, here's the thing that's new. We actually see cooler than normal waters popping up in this chart from 2 days ago. That's a little bit concerning, not so much for a Modoki El Nino, but if there was any hopes of real El Nino developing, this wouldn't be the case. The other side of it, though, is we haven't had a good Kelvin wave roll into this area in quite a while, and if trades are above normal, this would not be unexpected. We do not expect it to hold this way for very long. Let's go take a look and see what's going on subsurface. Here's the subsurface chart, actual water temperatures, and these are, of course, the anchors on the TAO buoy array, and the X's are the sensors, and these are actual temperatures. Doesn't mean a whole lot. It is the differences from normal, the anomalies that count. And again, this is the West Pacific here, East Pacific here, depth 150 meters. What we see is a big pocket of warmer than normal water. How did this water get here? It got here by westerly winds blowing at the surface from west to east, pretty much most of January, most of February, and now a major, stronger westerly wind burst, strongest of all of them so far, pushing more warm water. Remember, there's a patch of warm water at the surface right here, pushing that to depth, and then this warm water migrates east. It's expected to hit the Galapagos come about May 1st, start gurgling up there. So the warm water, the cool water we just saw up by the Galapagos will likely not be there that long. Once this warm water starts gurgling to the surface, it'll get caught by the trades and start then advecting over towards south of Hawaii in that area, probably continuing the trend towards a Modoki El Nino unless some other process is in play and the warm water stays bottled up off of Peru. Probably not expected, though. Here's another view, that same, just a different model sort of filling in the details. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 4 to almost 5 degree anomalies modeled here. That was the same as the previous chart. This qualifies as a pretty solid Kelvin wave, and that doesn't even count the westerly winds and the warm water that's falling at depth already. See that little pocket there? That'll merge in here. These temperatures will warm, and then as this whole pocket starts working its way to the east, temperatures will warm even more. We had a major westerly wind burst and Kelvin wave event last year, right at this time, right the same thing. That was, we thought, what was perhaps a major El Nino starting to develop. No, probably wasn't. Could have been the signal, though, for the change of the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, a long-running El Nino-La Nina-like oscillation, but instead of lasting for just a year and a half, it lasts for 15 years in each direction. We've been in the we suspect the down phase of the PDO since the big 97 El Nino. Whether we're actually coming out of it, some suggest we are and that we're moving back into the positive phase of the PDO. That would be great if it were true. We're not holding our breath yet. We'll cautiously optimistic. You would need almost, I'd say, 2 to 3 years of data before one could declare that. But still, it's a tantalizing theory and worth bearing watch. And finally, the forecast output from the CFS version 2 model, Nino 3.4 area, that is the region where El Nino typically is measured at, not where a Modoki El Nino is measured at. But the forecast suggests about 0.8 degree anomalies right now, which theoretically is El Nino-like, but seeing how we're in March, it's, the peak of your El Nino typically happens in December, so in terms of influencing winter storm production, we're too late, too little, too short. Doesn't really matter. We're now looking towards the fall and winter of 2015. At a minimum, this model suggests Modoki El Nino. But if temperatures really go in October up to about the 1.4 or 1.5 degree range, that would suggest El Nino. This model suggested that was going to happen last year. It did not. We never saw any sign of it. It continued in about the half degree anomaly range. It wouldn't be surprising to see that happen again next year. But still, Modoki El Ninos run for 2, 3, 4 years in a row sometimes, and then typically are culminated in a real, legit El Nino at the end. So all this is much better than a La Nina pattern, especially the La Nina pattern we've been in for the past 4 years. We'll take it. Every little bit helps. So for now, a kind of lackadaisical pattern is going on. The atmosphere is trying to organize, starting to be influenced by what appears to be a building active phase of the MJO. Westerly wind bursts fully in effect in the dateline region, expected to continue for the next week. Small little gale north of Hawaii, maybe producing some wind swell. Stronger gale forecast a couple days out, probably producing larger swell, not huge swell, just rideable, fun size swell for Hawaii, maybe by late in the week for next weekend. And relative to the U.S. West Coast, at this point, just a small, little piddly southern hemi swell working its way north for maybe later in the work week. Good enough while we wait and watch the jet stream be influenced by the MJO. The thought is a much stronger pattern is coming. It's kind of late in the year, though, but we're cautiously optimistic that there will be some more decent-sized surf later in the month of March. That would be a good thing. And then, of course, we continue to watch the El Nino, Modoki El Nino development. The expectation is that will continue into through this year into the winter months. So we have another winter to look forward to. The bottom certainly has not fallen out. If anything, things just continue to look better. Momentum building in the atmosphere. This is exactly what we want. So for now, go get some waves. Have a good time. We'll do this again next week. Same time, same channel. See you then.